Brothers and sisters, we'd ask you to rise as Brother Lorenzo Pope and his family join us. Thank you. Please be seated. Brothers and sisters, as family and friends of Brother C. Lorenzo Pope, we're grateful for the opportunity we have to gather with you and for you to share with us this moment of reflection, and as we remember him and as we honor him and as we mourn together his passing, and as we celebrate the glorious resurrection on this Easter weekend. We have just come from the family gathering where the family prayer was offered by Spencer Pope. We are grateful to Sister Judy Clark for providing our prelude music in here, and we will begin this meeting. Megan Pope will be our chorister, and Judy will play as we begin this meeting singing hymn number 293, Each Life That Touches Ours for Good, after which Sarah Pancheri will give us an invocation.
Father in heaven. We are so grateful for this opportunity to reunite with friends and family and loved ones. To celebrate the life and legacy of C. Lorenzo, our dad, our grandfather, our brother, our friend, our loved one. We miss him. We love him. We're so thankful for the gospel of Jesus Christ that helps us to know we will be with him again. We ask a special blessing of comfort and peace and strength that we will carry in our hearts. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Grateful for the spirit that's here. We will begin our program with a life sketch by Amy Lee. After that, we will have a musical number by the grandchildren, Families Can Be Together Forever, which will be accompanied by Melissa Pope. And then we'll move directly to the sharing of memories from Lorenzo A. Pope. And then the Pope's children will sing, again accompanied by Melissa Pope, Be Still My Soul. And we'll go to that point in the program.
I'm deeply honored to be the one to share the story of our amazing father's life. And in honor of him, I wore his favorite color. C. Lorenzo Pope, also known as Ren, was born in Logan, Utah on November 25th, 1944. He was the second son of John C. Pope and Dorothy Anderson Pope. His father served in the Army in Europe, and he didn't see Lorenzo until he was 8 months old. His mother named him, and that's why he went by C. Lorenzo Pope. Dad grew up in Salmon, Idaho, with his 4 siblings, Jim, Ross, Susan, and Irma. He cherished the relationship he had with his siblings. His father, my grandfather, owned several businesses. He owned Pope Oil, a bowling alley, and a Western wear store. Dad worked at all of them, but he preferred working at the Western store because he didn't have to get his hands dirty. One of the downsides of that is he was often asked to model the clothing for customers. That wasn't his favorite thing to do. Dad still does not like to get his hands dirty. His grandparents, Ermentrude and Lorenzo Anderson, lived next door, and he loved having them close. In high school, Dad was very involved and outgoing. He sang in a dance band and played guitar and drums, but he didn't do those at the same time, he told us. One of the downsides is that playing in a dance band is if he took a date, it wasn't very fun for her because he couldn't dance. Dad graduated high school with honors. He was student body president and a track and football star. I was really impressed by that for many years until he finally told me how small his graduating class was. But it still was a big accomplishment. His high school sports career ended with a knee injury, which required extensive surgery, but that did not change his love for sports. He continued to play tennis, racquetball, and golf, and even ran 2 marathons in his 60s. After high school, his family moved to Southern California. He then attended BYU for 1 year and then was called to serve in the Southwest Indian Mission on the Navajo Reservation, serving mostly in Arizona. It was a very challenging mission. He lived in a hogan, slept on the floor, hauled water, chopped wood, and he had to cook on a wood stove that was too small to hold a frying pan. While driving a truck along dirt roads, the missionaries frequently got stuck and had to find a way to get out. Yet, he would say that the Navajos had so much faith that he experienced a miracle a day during that time. After his 2-year mission and a year at Miracosta College, Dad returned to BYU. This is when he met Nancy Cropper. His best friend and the love of his life. They were married in September of 1968. Dad would spend the next 7 years at BYU. He would often say that those were very lean but happy years. Dad graduated as valedictorian of the College of Biological and Agricultural Sciences with a bachelor's degree in botany. He went on to earn a master's degree in botany and a PhD in genetics. During this time, they welcomed 3 children, Lorenzo, Curtis, and Amy, his favorite. In 1975, we moved to Chico, California, where Dad started working for Rice Researchers Incorporated as a plant breeder. While in Chico, he finished his dissertation and completed his PhD in 1976. Mom and Dad would spend the next 40 years in California, where they were blessed with 5 more children, Sarah, Spencer, Michael, Julia, and Anna. Dad would often say that he planned that because he was a geneticist, that he had 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 boys, and then 2 girls. I guess we'll never know. Dad worked for Rice Researchers for more than 40 years, working his way up to executive vice president and CEO. He was a brilliant scientist and left an impressive legacy, developing several varieties of the premium rice Cocoa Rose, and serving on a number of advisory boards and committees where he endeavored to make a difference in the California farming industry. Dad pursued every opportunity, including spending several months at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines and contracting with the University of Hawaii to do research there in the off-season. This allowed for 2 harvests a year, thus expediting his genetic research. It also allowed him to bring home chocolate-covered macadamia nuts every year, which we thoroughly enjoyed. Dad loved teaching and was pleased to work part-time as an adjunct professor at Chico State University. He was a remarkable businessman, owning several ranches and farms and doing extensive contract research for various chemical companies. Even in retirement, he continued his research. Dad taught his children to work hard. All 8, and many of our friends, spent time working for him at Rice Researchers, whether we wanted to or not. He was an avid gardener with a large garden and orchard where we worked many hours each week. As adults, when we would come visit, he'd often say, "I hope you brought your work shoes." That was my husband's first introduction to him. Pretty sure that's the first thing he said to him. Dad was a faith-filled and dedicated member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He served tirelessly in the church with the Boy Scouts as an executive secretary, a counselor in several bishoprics, as a bishop, as well as a member of the High Council. Dad lived a life of service, setting an example of true ministering. He was always thinking of others. We were all recipients of his kindness, whether it was an invitation to lunch, a note, a treat, financial assistance, or just his time. He taught his children faith and service through his example. Dad was always reading and learning and continuing his education, something he passed on to his children. He encouraged us to pursue education, and all 8 of us attended college. He would tell me that he never received a B in college and that I could do the same. I came close, but not quite. Dad loved to share what he learned. He would send out family newsletters, And let's be honest, Mom wrote them, but he would send them out. But he would always attach excerpts from his recent readings and share books that he enjoyed. Dad loved being a grandfather. He was blessed with 42 grandchildren. And again, he would say it was his genetics experience that helped him have 21 boys and 21 girls. We're still waiting on the great-grandchildren. Right now it's 5 girls and 6 boys. So, in 2015, after semi-retirement, because Dad never really retired, Mom and Dad moved to Provo, Utah, where one of his greatest joys was serving in the Provo Temple. He volunteered at the Provo Pioneer Village, where he planted an abundant garden and was a member of the Sons of the Utah Pioneers. Dad enjoyed travel, especially with his family. He planned and coordinated many group trips where he invited family and friends to join him. He really wanted us to build memories of doing things together. Dad was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, an illness which led to a life-saving bilateral lung transplant on December 4th of 2017. From that time on, he patiently and bravely dealt with challenging health conditions. But even after his illness, he wouldn't let his health issues stop him from living. He continued to play golf, read, and travel, and most of all, to serve. Dad studied hard, worked hard, played hard, and prayed hard, as he often encouraged us to do. He would sign all his letters to us with that phrase. We are grateful that he always endeavored to live his life exactly as he counseled us to do. We love you, Dad. Thank you for teaching, pushing, guiding, and encouraging us and loving us. And as he always would tell us, I know that our Father in heaven is telling him, "You done good, kid." We love you, Dad. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
take the faster route up here. So I've entitled the topic of my presentation, Life Lessons and Memories from C. Lorenzo Pope. There are a lot of them. I think someday I'll work with Amy and we'll write a book, or whoever wants to write. I'm not writing the book, it's going to be long. He was a man who did a lot of things, but the way I'm going to frame this is, Amy mentioned that Dad frequently would make a comment to us, whether verbally or definitely when he wrote to us, study hard, work hard, play hard, and pray hard. Looking back, it sounded like a mantra, just something that you would say, right? But it's actually something that it was the way he lived his life. That's just the way he lived all aspects of his life. Starting out with study hard, he was the valedictorian of his high school senior class. Granted, it was a small class, but still, right, valedictorian. He was the valedictorian of his college graduating class. He had straight A's through his master's degree program and his PhD program. He had basically perfect marks the entire time. So it was important to him. I think there was one time when he was at the local community college in California where he let down, and his dad basically put the fear of God into him, that you probably, if you want to have a life, you better do well. And he really took the challenge. That was, I think it might have been after his mission, and he was recovering from that time with the Navajos. I remember that after he started his career, you would think that after so many years of education, when I was a baby, my dad was still in college for like 5 years, right? So we moved, in fact, probably 6 years. When we moved to Chico, he continued to take classes. He took business classes at the local universities. He took accounting classes. And I think the one that he realized that he was really going to have to get an arm around was tax. He took tax classes because he didn't really basically want to work hard and then have all of his money go to taxes. So, I had to be smarter about it. In our first house, his study table was one of those folding card tables at the foot of the bed. The chair was the bed. There wasn't enough space. And Dad did study. I think even when I was a kid, I was like, does that table always have to be there? Anyway, but apparently it was important. Later on, when he made the house bigger, he got a real office, and he did study in there and do a lot of book work. The one that is probably the biggest section is his work hard. Study hard, work hard. Curtis and Amy talked a little bit more about the pray hard, but we'll talk about that in a second. But Dad worked harder than any of us children ever knew. In fact, a funny quip is that by the time Curtis and I were working in the fields with him at Rice Researchers, we were the only ones who could keep up with fully grown men, right? And we were just young teenagers, right? But we had learned, working next to Dad, how to work hard. As Amy mentioned, his primary career, he was a scientist, hired at Rice Researchers Incorporated. He started as a scientist only to be a plant breeder. Well, the company recognized pretty quickly that he was very talented as a businessman, and so they put him in charge as the general manager of the station. But he was so good that they put him in charge of managing all of the contracts with growers to grow rice for Rice Researchers. So very quickly, he was the most important person in that company, and I think he took a lot of pride in the fact that he was highly respected. He was highly respected in the industry, in the community. It was fun to be around him. I didn't write this in here, but I frequently thought that he loved to be called Dr. Pope. Everybody called him Dr. Pope, even people who didn't really know him as, you know, a PhD person or anything. Unless it was church, they called him Brother Pope or Bishop Pope. At home, they called him Dad, you know, a brother or whatever. But everybody else called him Dr. Pope as an honorary title, because he was good enough that, you know, he just, it felt like it was right to respect him in such a way. He never would just be content with the status quo. So at Rice Researchers, for example, he's like, well, we should expand, right? We need a North Ranch, so they got a North Ranch, right? And like, oh, well, let's go get a South Ranch. So they had a South Ranch, and then they had an East Ranch. And my dad's the one who had to manage all of those ranches, right? It's not like, oh, we get more people. No, he didn't get more people. You'll find out later that if he got more work, then he'd just recruit more helpers, but because he loved the togetherness. In addition to his working there, he had church callings that put him in charge of family reliance, you know, and personal reliance. So he actually started some businesses where he did like food storage things, and so he had access to all of these. He was well respected in the agricultural community, so he had access to the sugar mill and these, you know, bakery people. Not really directly, but he just knew people. So he arranged to get buckets, and we, all his family and children and friends, cleaned the buckets, and then he arranged to get, like, you know, pallets of sugar or wheat or rice, which of course he could get because he grew rice, mashed potatoes, powdered milk or whatever. He'd package those up and he'd sell them to people. I'm not sure he made any money because he always gave a whole bunch to people who couldn't pay for it so that they could have their food storage. So he was sort of a force, like a little tornado, and wherever he went, he kind of like brought people around him to help in whatever the project of the moment was. Well, of course, you know, he couldn't let the rest, you know, after he had these rice ranches, you know, for Rice Researchers, he asked if he could farm. And his boss, was a terrific boss, says, well, you can farm if you farm with my son. And which actually kind of worked out for Dad because he always farmed with partners. Started farming there, and I couldn't count the total, but I imagine that he probably had 15 farming partnerships, including with Mom, and they farmed a lot of rice. I don't even know how he did it. The amazing thing, and even I was a partner of my dad farming, right? What do I know about farming? Nothing, right? So in the traditional pattern, you know, he wanted to farm together. He wanted to be together. He did most of the work, you know, and when he got the profits, he split it 50-50, which I thought, like, well, I'm not sure how that math works, but it worked for him because there were very few people on the planet who wouldn't be pleased to work with him in any capacity. It was really nice. So later on, he was such a force in that community that the chemical representatives would come to him and ask him to do studies. And I think early on he said, "No, I really can't do that." We started doing these studies for them, you know, to see if you know, chemicals would work on rice and not. And in order to do that, he needed more people. So he would get people to do all things, you know, and all of us boys worked with my dad, you know, doing these research studies. So much so that when we got to the age of college, we were the most qualified and the hardest working, and we got all of the summer internship jobs. And because BYU got out early, we got them before everybody else. So, you know, I personally worked 5 summers as a summer intern. I think Curtis did, and Michael did, Spencer did. So it was this tradition of working hard and being respected in your field of work. It was beautiful. Every time we went out with him, he was well appreciated. So, I mean, it's just lovely. So, it's interesting. I think he wouldn't have done these chemical studies, except looking back, I think he did it for a few reasons, which kind of line up with some of the other things I mentioned. I think the first one was that he wanted to be on the edge of the technology in his field. So even while he wasn't in class, he was still at the very forefront of what was happening, helping them make decisions, helping them decide, which way we should move in the industry. It was really kind of beautiful to watch. I think he also did it to basically take one for the team. In other words, we need to support the industry because it's hard enough to grow rice. It's harder if you don't have good tools. So he wanted to make sure they had good tools. And then probably the most important one, or the biggest one to him, was he could do it with people, and it took a lot of people. It took a lot of people. In fact, of the people my age in here that lived in Chico, we probably all worked with Dad doing chemical research plots and things. It was great. It was a great time. As Amy mentioned, this is really funny to me, but when his children were married, right, and they would come in to visit from out of town, Dad would always say, I hope you brought your work shoes. I remember it as work boots, but people don't wear boots so much anymore, so I'll probably switch to shoes. But because Jared, I think, one time didn't bring his work shoes, which meant he had to get his dress shoes dirty. So there was always work to do, right? Dad made work for us to do. Another funny thing is Saturdays were work days, definitely. Holidays were work days, always, unless they were on a Sunday. Now that was a beautiful time for us. We didn't work on Sundays. Thanksgiving and Christmas were half work days. So Christmas was a half work day in the afternoon, Thanksgiving was a half work day in the morning. So kind of funny. Dad did a lot of gardening, as you probably know. He gardened when he was in college at BYU, found places to garden, where the greenhouses are now. When we were in Chico, he found places to garden, and then when he had a place of his own, always had a big garden. Plant lots of fruit trees. When he moved across town to Chico, same thing, big garden. And this is really terrible, but he buys a 5-acre lot to build a house. And then he decides that he's going to plant 3 acres of walnuts, but there's no water. So then, so we're talking about work here. So first of all, it takes a lot of work to plant, 3 acres worth of walnuts. But then, so then here he brings the boys over, maybe the girls, but I remember the boys. And we go to the neighbor's house, we're filling these big barrels of water, and they're watering 3 acres of walnuts by hand for a long time, right? And then eventually got a well, and we put in a drip system and all that stuff. But that was just his style. It's kind of like, plus he still had the other Chico house garden and all those trees. And I don't think Dad was ever afraid of creating more work. Because he just meant that he could involve more people, right? And whenever he could, he paid them well. So no one was ever disappointed when he said, they got asked to help him, because he just wanted to make sure that everybody would always say yes. So now we're to play hard. Play hard is interesting because I think it was a code. I really think it was a code. Because it didn't mean like go play games hard. Dad didn't really like to play games that much, right? Maybe when he was younger. But I think it meant to enjoy time and build relationships when you're not working, which kind of sometimes he mixed, work and play together, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But his most common play hard activity, interestingly enough, I think, was that he really liked to go eat with people. You'd work hard on something, and then he'd take everybody to lunch. And then you go back to work, right? or, do the same thing, and I'd go to dinner together. It was a big thing. He usually paid, maybe not always, unless, but I did frequently. An interesting thing is that Dad never went out to eat alone that I know of. He always went with somebody. And he went a lot of the time. He went with colleagues, he went with friends, he went with coworkers, he went with children. People come into town, they'd go out to dinner. It was a celebratory event, right? I think in his eyes. It was something that he just really loved to do. It was a time to socialize and to be united in conversation. And in fact, Mom almost always packed him a lunch, a sack lunch. He didn't always eat it, but when he did eat it, he ate it with people who were coworkers in the building. He didn't even eat it by himself, right? He shared his sack lunch with other people. So, kind of funny. But sometimes, he would prioritize, like, hey, let's go out to eat over the sack lunch, But it was always there. And he did always eventually eat some of the sack lunch. Interestingly enough, Dad loved to golf, but he didn't really start until he was later, until he was older. I don't know, I think he might have been in his 50s when he started golfing. Never alone, always with friends or family. Dad loved to travel. Never alone. Always with friends, family, with Mom. Even with Mom, they'd always go with friends and family, siblings, sibling trips. It was amazing. I mean, when Dad traveled, I don't think he did it to see the places. I think he did it to share the time with people, which is notable. Dad loved to fish, but only with friends. First with his dad, then with his brother Ross, mainly, when they were in Provo going to school, and Chuck and Larry and whoever else would go with him. He loved fishing in Alaska, but never went alone. He always went with friends, with his son-in-law. He always brought a force with him, right? The more the merrier. They had a good time. I think he liked to fish, but I think he went for the camaraderie and the companionship and the time that was spent together. Family vacations. Always to visit family. Family to visit more family. Always. Every other year we'd switch between the families, to one side of the family, to the other side of family, always to visit family. I don't think we ever went on a vacation that wasn't to visit family until his family was too big, right? Had too many families inside it. And then all of our vacations were together as a family. We did go places, but we didn't go to see those things. I mean, we went to be with family. It was really lovely. Some of the trips after his children were grown and had their own families, he paid for most of these, by the way, which meant that he cared a lot. He wanted everybody to be there. He didn't want anybody to be missing if it could happen that way. We went on a Book of Mormon or a Book of Mormon lands cruise to see all of the sites of what could have been in the Book of Mormon. We went on Oscar and Hammerstein's cruise as a family. He liked the cruises because everybody had to mingle, right? You just always gather for dinner, always meeting. And these first two, I'm not sure that the kids appreciated this, they were educational ones. So you had to go to classes, all in classes at the same time. So it kind of meant the study hard and family together and praying together and eating together. I was really loving for him. We did a Bear Lake cabin as a group, so now everybody's in the same building, right? Eating together, praying together, doing everything together. We did a very notable one. We went on two cruises in Europe and a land tour. It was a 3-week spectacular thing, all together, right? The cruises forced together, across Italy. It was just, I mean, those memories are going to be with us for a very long time. And the most recent one was church history tour. So, and that one was someone that Dad had on in his bucket list. He did really love church and church history. So, I mean, just looking back, I mean, the whole purpose of every one of those things was to build unity, to build relationships, to strengthen love for family, and share time together. Pray hard. I think pray hard was another code word. It basically was a code word for love God, love your neighbor, live your religion. You know, of course, pray earnestly was in there also, right? So he was faithful in his callings as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was a true disciple servant in that he doesn't necessarily do things the way that everyone else did them. He did them the best way that he knew how. I think of him as a home teacher, as ministering, 40 years before ministering was a thing, right? That's how he did home teaching, was to minister to those. See a need, fill it. He would just see something needed to happen, he would just do it. Somebody needed food, fine. Somebody needed companionship, fine. This is really interesting but when we had our family gatherings, especially in Chico, especially when the house was big enough to allow gatherings, the children always remember that we always had a non-family member guest. Not related to us. That many of us maybe didn't even know who it was. They were treated like family. While they were there, they were family. Which I think early on we're like, who is this person? You know, like, why are they at our family Christmas celebration? But my mom learned early on that when the rest of us opened one present on Christmas Eve, we better have Christmas presents for the guests too, so that they could open one Christmas present like they were family, right? Like they were family. And they were family when we treated them like family, especially he did, and because he did, we did too, right? All right, your family too, right? Probably hugged them on the way out. I'm pretty sure we did, you know, thanks for visiting, drive safely, we'll see you again next year. It was really great. Yeah, if it's interesting, I'm gonna make a comment here, but I don't know of another person, myself personally, who was a best friend to so many different people. I made a list just myself, just a casual list. I think there are no less than 15 people who would have called him their very best friend. I mean, I know, let's not count mine, right? Because the score would be far, far lower. These are people, and I'm going to give you I'm just going to quote here. This is typical of how he treated his friends. One friend remarked, Ren was like a brother to me, and I will miss him dearly. I can honestly say he was and is the truest friend I have ever had. Thank you for giving me the privilege of being part of the Pope family over the years. So this is a non-family member who considers them their truest friend, like a brother. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. He felt like a family member. That's just how he was. And I personally believe, I'm sure there were others,